empty schools mean hungry kids. So it went looking, if you've ever been in a school lunchroom, it looked like this one day and literally like this the next. So somebody that here in Tampa wanted to do something about this. Ms. Rubik from Fanatics decided he wanted to build the world's largest digital fundraising. And his goal was to provide food to those who are in need. Really, COVID-19 raised this opportunity, but his mission was to provide food to all those in need, kids, elderly, frontline heroes. It's raised over $50 million. It was launched on April 14th. What's exciting about this is they launched the nonprofit and the site in 10 days. Now, it wasn't pretty, it wasn't perfect, but they had such a mission to get it out there fast. By April 14th, they got it launched, and within just a few days, it had raised $6 million. So over $50 million have been raised to date. So I bring this up because I think this is a great example of someone who grew their product mindset and took an opportunity to think bigger and change the world. Welcome to our evening tonight, where we're going to explore a couple of ways to do that. I just wanted to get out of our corporate world for a minute and just start with something that really brought us back and connected us all on the human level. Because what I believe is, if you can change the way you think, you can change the way you work, and you can change the world. And that might seem idealistic, but I love working with products and with companies who really have those types of hope and optimism and ways to really get into the spirit of building product and building services and things that our customers really love. So as I was introduced, I'm a PST. I've been delighted to know Ravi for several years. I've been trying to get out to Dallas before this came. I've got some good friends out there as well, and I have some friends in Plano. So always feel a little bit connected to your space anyway. But in my Agile journey, I really have centered in that product space, and particularly in product discovery. A lot of product rescue, some product management, some coaching, but I really find the most delight in product discovery. So I feel like that's a little bit of my superpower. So we're going to do a little bit of interactivity in this webinar. One of the things that you can do is, if you can see that on the screen, go to menti.com, if you can open up another browser, and just use the code that's on the screen, 73249. And this quick little question will just get us connected electronically so we can get some interactivity going with you guys and hopefully have a little fun tonight. So if you can't see that, it's kind of small. It's Menti, M-E-N-T-I, menti.com, and the code is 73249. And I'll give that about a minute. The invitation is to just give us an example of another positive initiative that's maybe been in your world that's come out of COVID-19, just in 2 to 3 words. It just helps us kind of connect with each other since we've been moving through this great pause together. So we have some great things coming up already. A sense of community, less traffic accidents. It's kind of phenomenal. I live in a neighborhood with some brick streets, and the grass is growing up between the bricks, and so the streets actually look a little green, like they need to be mowed. Telemedicine, yes, that's a great one. Empathy, lots of charity fundraising. I love it. Planet healing, isn't that a great thing? I have had my very first telemedicine with over Zoom, so that was a very interesting experience. I'm sure many of us have shared. Neighborhood unity. Often I'll take a walk, I'll hear people, singing or playing music outside, and lots and lots of those types of things. So this is great, very positive. Learning from Julie, and spelled my name right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I don't have to commute. Family time, that's great. I love these. It really feels like we have much more in common when we've been through what I'm calling this the great pause. It's really been nice to be able to connect with many people in so many different ways, including connecting with you all. So, all right, great. So it's a great chance to connect with our technology and to use this tool for a little bit of interactivity. So let's move a little bit forward into our topic tonight. So just kind of considering what I just, that very high level conversation about the All-In Challenge, let's hear from you guys. How important were these product elements to what you might know about the All-In Challenge? Now, the All-In Challenge is, you know, it's raised $50 million. It's really connecting sports stars and media stars with fans to auction off experiences or things and to raise money for this food, this access to food. So thinking about these 4 product elements, how important were these, do you think, to that amazing success of such a phenomenal fundraiser in such a short time? And I just have a little note on there. When we're thinking about a business case and we're thinking about nonprofits, we change this idea of profit to, you know, the good that we're doing in the community or in the world when we form a nonprofit. So I can see you guys are relating to that. Nice. Any of you who might just be catching up with Menti, you can't see that code 73249. Nice. It was really phenomenal to see this site being built in just a few days and see such a response. It's fairly simple site, you know, and they've improved it as it's gone along. But it's interesting to kind of think about these 4 different elements in something that is so widespread, so accessible to so many people, and the amount of money that's kind of being moved through this site, and just thinking behind the scenes of everything that kind of had to go beyond, you know, what we might see on the screen. The technical feasibility, it obviously has to be easy to use because it's going out to the public and there's no learning manual, and people really tying into the mission of that. So we can see that they're, you know, not too far apart, right? Like most of these are pretty up there near that high importance, that strongly agree side. And really, that's what it takes when we're talking about building viable products. Those are the 4 risks, or the 4 areas that we really think about. And we have to really, I really love what Marty Kagan says about product management, really being in the middle of good business case. You know, we're in the business of making money, or with the example of the All-In Challenge, you know, this nonprofit of giving back to the world, but it has to be easy to use. I'm sure many of us have had an app that we just couldn't use and we stopped using it, or we've been forced to use a tool, maybe a work tool that hasn't been easy to use, and it's very frustrating, and we're just sort of forced to use it. And then he also reminds us that engineers know the art of the possible, sometimes more than business people. So as any kind of a product person, it's always great to tap into your engineering talent and really start to understand what's technically feasible. So we need things that are usable, right? We really, this sort of resurgent back into human-centric design. It has to be viable and valuable from a business perspective, something that people will actually use and understand how to use, and technically feasible. So, you know, not only does the business need to be able to profit from it or to give back to the world, but as we start to make sustainable products, it has to be able to use the time and the technology and the resources available and be able to grow and scale from that. All right, and one more question just to keep us going here. Now that we are starting to think about the product world, we're thinking about that product mindset, what does that actually mean? Why don't you give me your thoughts? What does it mean to have a product mindset? Just give me a couple of words, 2 to 3 words. A long-term focus, absolutely. It's interesting because as we move from a project mindset to a product mindset, we see a change in the way that we're thinking. It's totally okay to bring a project approach to products. You might have a budget, you might have a target launch or date, but we want to start thinking about continual improvement and long-term focus and what happens after we launch. Some great ones here, sky is the limit. I love that. Work a lot in innovation, and so I love to see these words about creativity and imagination. Chart your own path. I don't know who said anything about compromise. Hopefully you're laughing. and incremental delivery. Nice. And this is a good one, thinking of outcomes over output. So really thinking about customer-focused outcomes over output. We can have a lot of outputs that lend itself to outcomes. So a nice add there. And what does your customer need? I think that's a really good segue into the next slide. Evolutionary change, these are great. And validation. You guys are stealing my thunder here. I don't think you need me. All right, let's go on a little bit. One of the things I like to do when we talk about this is take some of the phrases that we might be used to saying or hearing or reading and just twist up our vocabulary a little bit. Just something to, a few nuances to our thinking, just to push the envelope a little bit and maybe bring back to our business to get them to go a little further. You know, a lot of times things start to feel like buzzwords. And so I just want to look at some of these common phrases and how maybe one word or a small nuance can change some of what we're thinking, to, even if it's just a little degree. So thinking about build to need, isn't that interesting? So many things are really centered around what our customers want. But if we're really building what they need and what they will pay for, it starts pushing us towards continual learning, and it's really rooted in growth mindset principles. And then thinking about that, we can validate if it is actually needed and useful by measuring user engagement. So if we're really focusing on success being not if we launched on time, not you know, what that budget looked like, if we met that budget, those are project-minded goals. If we really think about what is our measurement of user engagement. So an example of that is somebody like Facebook doesn't measure success just in terms of number of unique visitors. They're really measuring the type of user engagement that really makes a desirable user for them. So they believe if they can get a user, a brand new user, to friend 7 people in 7 days, that's behavior that they know helps them have a really sticky user. So we're going beyond something like unique visitors or sitting on, you know, number of features used or time in an app to what's the kind of behavior that we want to measure. An interesting one for me, we talk a lot about time to market. And I love to ask my customers, how fast is fast? What does time to market really mean for you? How fast are your customers going? How fast do you have to be? Are we talking about, you know, weeks, days, minutes? What really is happening in your market segment, and what does time to market look like? And can we go further and start measuring time to value? At what point is this thing that we're providing to our customers, whether it's a product or a service, something new, at what point in time does it start to show value to them? And so that's an interesting conversation to go a little further and put ourselves in our user's point of view. At what point does this something really become valuable? Thinking about prioritizing the growth of our business over product perfection. Now, this is one of my favorites. I don't know if any of you have something like this, a smartphone, or anything else, any other product that you pretty much rely on every day. Every now and then, I will get an upgrade to my little gadget here, and it's not quite successful. Something goes wrong. Maybe there's a funny character when I start to text, and so, you know, it's not texting the way that it should. Maybe there's some hiccup. You know, maybe there's some little thing that starts to show up through use over the day. So anybody have that? I'm guessing. Can't see you, but I'm guessing that might have happened. And you might, as you might imagine, I just throw it away. It's not perfect, so I just throw it away, right? Probably not. When we have really valuable products and we have an upgrade, we are experimented on all the time as consumers. We don't just throw away that product because it's not perfect. What we know is that we have a trust in the product, in that brand, and they're going to follow up with an upgrade, right? So this is an example. We get tested on all the time. We get experimented with all the time, and we're okay with it. We're actually pretty okay with it. We like our products. We count on them. We have some trust with the brand. And so we just wait because we know that they're going to come up with an upgrade. I'm going to plug it in that night. It's going to come up within an upgrade. And within a day or two or an upgrade or two, that issue is going to be resolved. So it's really fascinating to me that even though we're experimented on all the time by all the big products, we are really reluctant to turn around and experiment with our own users. So many times I hear people talk about not being willing to take those risks and really wanting something to be perfect. But if Fanatics had stepped back and said that they wanted their site to be perfect, think about the millions of dollars that could have been lost by waiting till the site was perfect, by waiting until they felt like they had everything in a row to launch that. Right? So every day that they delayed could have meant the difference with hundreds of thousands of meals that they provided people through a very uncertain time. So this is one of my favorites, is really understanding the switch in our mindset to prioritize growth over product perfection. And then we talk a lot about welcoming change. What would it mean if we went back to our teams and said, how can we excel at change? What has to change for us to feel like we can excel at change? Not just the buzzword, but what does that look like? And for Fanatics, it meant that 95% of their code base could be reused for that site that they built. So they were already positioned to excel at pivoting in the marketplace and being able to provide something that was so valuable because they had built this culture of being able to have a fluid response. And then I think somebody mentioned this idea of budgeting for ongoing investment, not time. And we often have a little phrase that we say, we want to fund teams, not projects. And so I call it a dispatch model, when we'll get a project in the shop in some companies, and then we build a team around it, and then they form and storm and norm, and then the project goes away, and they all run back to a homeroom, and then they wait to be dispatched to the next project, and we start the process over and over again, and we start that investment over and over again. And when somebody calls in with an improvement or an idea or a need for an existing product, there is no team there to help resolve it. So we want to shift that to a product mindset of having this ongoing investment. So it's not budgeted just by time, but it's talking about those value metrics that we mentioned. All right, so today, really briefly, I'm just going to bring out 3 points to take. This is sort of the academic portion before we get into our little exercise. You can see I'm heavily influenced with the bias towards action and design thinking. And these are some of the things that we pull out from design thinking that we blend with the product mindset and with some agility, some of that business agility that we've been talking about. The first one is to define the problem. And what we often talk about is really that discovery phase, and how really, I'm going to say, discovery is the new knowing. So we are spending a lot of time in development and not so much in discovery. So we want to come back to really define what's the value we are creating. What is it that we are trying to solve? Who's going to benefit from this thing that's out there? Someone in the last slide, when we're talking about building, to me, like really recognize what is the problem that we want to solve, and then discovering more about it so that we can figure out if we're going to be going in the right direction. And value is tricky. Value is really, we know this, that value is what your customer is willing to pay for, but it's not just about revenue, right? It's not just about cost savings. It's not just about, some of those efficiency things that we see in our products and our services, getting from point A to point B. The value conversation has really changed over the last couple of years, and I'm going to give you a couple of little tips and some resources to look into to see if that changes your dialogue a little bit. And then thirdly, validating the outcome. So we talk a lot about outcomes. Somebody mentioned that when we were talking about the product mindset, validating the outcome. And what we know is that value is really only an assumption until it's validated by the market. So we're putting a guess out there, right? And we are often looking to see if we can measure things by some metric. But what we really want to start seeing is if we can start identifying ways to measure assumptions or ways to validate assumptions before we ever start development. So when we're thinking about those assumptions and how they're tied to outcomes, let me just throw this thought out there. An outcome is a measurable change in human behavior that creates value. And so this is how they all come together. We're thinking about those outcomes, things that impact or influence or create money for a company, or like this nonprofit we've been talking about, build out this great support for people in need, like really meeting their mission of the nonprofit. So those are outcomes, but what were the kinds of assumptions that had to be validated to see if this was actually going to work in the market? So when we're thinking about assumptions, we're not necessarily saying, can I build a website? Can I build that tricky algorithm? Can I build an AI bot? We're not talking about just the feasibility from a technical perspective. What we really want to start measuring is assumed change in behavior. So those are the three things we're going to talk about today. Now, as we go along, Jamie and Ravi are monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop some questions in the chat, and they'll interrupt me and we can cover them as we go. Okay, one of my very favorite product people, Seth Godin. If you don't have his blog or email in your feed, it's just a great little nudge every day that gets you thinking about the product mindset. I love what he says, don't find customers for your products, find products for your customers. So going beyond what they're asking for and really going out and what we call the outside in approach, not the inside out approach. So I'll give you an example. I was working for a company. They were building out this really beautiful dashboard for some customers. And they thought, you know what, this is a great dashboard. We can turn this into a product. But they never went out and validated how that dashboard was working for their customers. And they never went out to validate if that dashboard could be used by other people, even in the same industry. So we often do that. We come across a good idea, or we've got something built that seems good for one customer, and we might assume that it's a good product without going out to the market and seeing if we're really solving a problem for more than that one key person. So the outside in approach is the belief that customer value creation is the key to success. So we're switching our thinking from inside out to outside in. This is big business. When we're thinking about those customer needs, design companies, those companies that really focus on those human-centric needs, outperform other companies by 200%. I find this a phenomenal number. Now, some of these brands, I have a lot of loyalty. Look at those products on the left. Some of them that I'm most familiar with, Apple. I have my handy dandy little computer here. I don't even use it as a phone. It's much more of my mobile desktop. I'm a big Disney fan. I live here in Florida now, and not necessarily a Disney World consumer, but love the products, love what they stand for. I've really enjoyed watching their growth in buying and taking some risks with things like buying Marvel or the acquisition of Pixar, some of those edgier brands, and the way that they were able to consume those brands without damaging the existing brand, and how it kind of modernized Disney, really modernized the princess story. We've gone from princesses in my daughters growing up that really was looking for the prince to come along, to princesses that my granddaughter knows really well, like Frozen, who's really relying on her own strengths and that of her sister. And so we're seeing the modernization of brands in a 100-year-old company, through acquisition and taking measured risks and really paying attention to what their customers really want. And another one of my favorites is, I was a traveler. One of my favorites was Starwood. I was one of those, road warriors that was really upset when they merged with Marriott, because I love my reward systems, as you can imagine, being a traveler, and they were doing a lot of stuff right. So, you probably look at some of these brands and have some of the same reactions I do. What we know is that when we have that brand loyalty, really what it's doing is it's evoking a feeling inside of us, right? We have some kind of loyalty to these brands because of an emotion that we can tie into it. And as I talk about these brands, or as I work with customers and I ask them to think about their favorite product companies, a lot of these things are coming up as repeats, because they really have tapped into what it is that their users really tie into, products that their customers really love. And so this ties into the quote from, I think, one of the hidden gurus in the product world, Chris Spagnoli. He lives up in Fort Collins. He's been one of my mentors in this space and introduced me a lot to different product things. This is one of his quotes: stop thinking about your customers and start thinking like your customers. I just want to pause there because that's a twist to the thinking. I will hear all the time about how employee engagement or customer engagement or any kind of engagement is our number one objective, right? They're having a cultural problem. They're putting a lot of effort around there. If they're, a lot of finance companies, we're passionate about our customers. I hear this all the time. So they're doing a lot of talking and thinking about their customers, but they're kind of reluctant to leave their seat, right? They're really kind of reluctant to, bring customers into reviews or to get out of their seat and go talk to them, build some personal relationships. They'll send account managers or sales reps, or some kind of buffer is always built in. And so kind of difficult to get connected right to the actual user. So I love something that has been introduced recently from Bain & Company. So this is another source that you can add to your list. This kind of really blew my mind when I first saw it. Bain & Company has actually codified value. Now, I'm just going to show you a very small piece of what they've done. I really encourage you to go out to their site or go to the Harvard Business Review and just look up the Bain pyramids of value. I'll give you just a little flavor. Now, many of the things that we use every day are apps or products or services that meet those functional needs. They make somebody money, they save somebody time, they might save somebody money, they might reduce risk, right? We can go on and on. I would bet many of us have some kind of app on our phone that helps us organize in some way. I'm a Kanban fan, I love my lists, and so I have lots of little, things that I do in my life that help organize me. Now, also, as we start thinking further, there's an emotional layer. There's a lot of apps or products or services out there that are tapping into really the heart of some of the things that really affect us at an emotional level. There's just a couple of examples here. You might see that I'm wearing my Fitbit, if I can get it here in the camera. I am waiting for the mocking and ridiculing app. I don't think that their motivational stuff works very well for me, so I'm waiting for a little sharper messaging to come across to get me out there and to do more movement. But wellness and therapy meditation apps are actually a big trend right now, and we've seen a surge in that. So lots of emotional apps, products, and services are out there. And I pulled one of these out. I pulled out attractiveness as an example because I think it's interesting, right? Like that's actually, a product strategy, to have a product that taps into people's attractiveness. So that Victoria's Secret is an example of that. You might think of a product like a Rolex. That's tapping into this idea of having an heirloom, right? Wanting to have something like, not only is it feeding my ego, which is a totally valid value, but it's also tapping into this desire of, having an heirloom or something I can pass on. As we sort of move up this pyramid, we start to think about those life-changing things that might be tapped into hope or motivation or affiliation. I grew up in Idaho. We didn't have our own football team, and so my dad was a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, and so I have always had an affiliation for Dallas. No, I did not make that up for this talk, because I know you guys are in Texas, but there's always these affiliations that we have, Boston Red Sox, these things that people really are tied to, and so there's a lot of products that really tap into these life-changing needs that we have as people. Now, before I get to the top of this pyramid, one of the things I want to relate is the fact that they are more apt to buy a product or change a behavior when we are solving those problems, right? And so the last part of this pyramid is really this self-transcendence, this ability to really tap into this highest level of social impact, this thing that we sort of all secretly aspire to. Now I'm going to pause here, and maybe we can just get this through chat. Thinking back on your school days, does this pyramid remind you of anything? Just go ahead and use your chat if you're seeing a relationship of this pyramid to anything else that has to do with psychology. Thank you, Red Davison from Plano, the Maslow's needs, exactly. And so what we have found watching the work that Bain and Company has done, the higher up the pyramid that we can move with our value proposition, the more people are willing to buy or to change their behavior. So what this has done is pushing us past just thinking about we're saving money, we're making money, we're delighting the customer, and really start to codify what our value proposition could look like. The more that you can go up that pyramid, the more willing that they are to tap into buying a product or changing their behavior or using a service. So it's really important that we start to really tie into what it is that our customers really have a need for. What's the problem that we're trying to solve for them? And I'm laughing because Mike Torrance says this looks like the food groups. So nicely done, Mike Torrance. Oh, and just to back up, just to think about this for a minute, one of those examples is Tom's and 40 Ocean. I don't have my bracelets around, but I'm a big environmentalist. And so, tapping into self-transcendence means buying a product where maybe somebody's giving something back. I don't know if any of you are wearing Tom's shoes or Bomba socks, 40 Ocean, Rothy's. There's a ton of products out there that give something back. And so I'm more apt to pay more for a product when I know that some of that is going back to causes that I care about. And that actually is a pivot point for me. So when we talk about products that tie into self-transcendence, that's really what we're talking about. And then even thinking about that nonprofit story, right? People are really tapping into this all-in challenge because it's meeting things on so many levels. If I'm a fan, right, it's really tying into affiliation with, a sports star or a media star. There might also be an element of hope in there because maybe they're seeing neighborhoods or friends or family struggling with hunger, and then they're able to give back. They're able to build out this self-transcendence by knowing that the money that they are using, in pursuit of this is helping them feel good about where they're able to give some social impact back to the world. So I think that's a really good example of the successfulness of what that effort has done and how it taps in on so many of those layers in the pyramid. All right, don't forget to use the chat if you have any questions, and we are moderating that. So our last quote to just throw out there, Marty Kagan, validating those assumptions that people don't know what's possible with technology. None of us really do know until we actually see it. And this reminds me of, how fast and how far data and artificial intelligence is going, and how much we're uncovering even blockchain. There's so much stuff out there that's really pushing the envelope that it's really important to bring our technologists into some of our discovery efforts so that we understand the art of the possible. So we talk about evidence-based management, we talk about evidence-based medicine. So now I'm going to talk about evidence-based discovery. So this is a pretty common pattern. Our customer comes in with an idea or an ask, and we deliver. We have great customer service. If you're a good, solid product owner, for example, or you've got somebody on your team, they take that idea or ask. We've learned a lot about vision. Thank you, to a lot of those people who talk about, getting back to the why and building out vision, Roman Pickler and some of these others. We really pushed the vision envelope. And then even, I love story maps, right? It's a great way to build out the release plan and lend itself to the MVP. We've learned to get feedback quick and to get betas out there and then public launches. But one of the things that we're missing is all of these things are building on a certain level of assumptions. And each of those things require a certain level of effort. And it just increases and it increases and it increases. And sometimes what we're missing is the problem fit. Are we solving a problem? So this idea of, Marty Kagan calls it being a mercenary versus a missionary. A mercenary just goes and does what they're told, and a missionary really is evangelizing and getting to the heart of things. And so he talks a lot about this discovery side of things. So we won't be able to go over these today. These are some things that we cover in some of our product boot camps and even some of the design thinking stuff. We've been witness to a lot of these things ourselves, and all of these are giving us increasing levels of evidence. So the point is, I'll put these couple of examples out there. We'll talk about them really quickly. The point is, if you're not doing any of these things, if you're jumping right into delivery, then this could be waste. Now, we could go into some of those examples, you know, on the discovery. We could really talk about discovery all day long. Look them up, look up those couple of examples. I'll back up here quickly. We don't have time to get into a lot of the stories, but Dropbox really, with a 2-minute explainer video, they went from 5,000 on their mailing list to 75,000 overnight. Right, Zappos was testing the assumption of just would people buy shoes online. Before he ever built a site, he just went and bought shoes and mailed them through the post office. So they were these brands that we're so used to, that are common name brands. They didn't come, you know, off of some big platform. They weren't launched through, you know, some kind of magic. It was just good old discovery and validation of those assumptions that helped them understand if they had a really good business case. So if you're not doing these on the discovery side, moving right into delivery could be waste. And then if you want to go further, if you are working in an agile team, then you could start to think about what kind of validation you can actually do inside your sprint. This is another thing to add to your learning list. Jeff and Joff have done such a great job of building out the lean UX processes, and also helping us at scrum.org build out a new course called Scrum with UX, and just different ways to bring validation and experiments, you know, into our sprint. There are some things with UX that have to expand outside of the sprint, but there's so much that we can do inside there and close the gap between discovery and development. All right, a little comment. We could be working in big IT, which just does what is on the to-do list. And that's what I hear a lot, right? Is we think that we just are part of this big machine, and we're being told what to do, and we don't always have that opportunity to get involved. So I want to throw something out here. We're going to move really quickly into a very high level look at a discovery technique. I've used this technique when I have felt exactly like that comment. I've just been told what to do, and I've also been given the date. Nobody asked my developers how long I was going to take. I've lived in that world for, you know, too many years to count. So another person I want to pull just a little bit of a taste from to give you an idea about some product discovery, or even ways to reshape a backlog, is Teresa Torres from producttalk.org, when she says, when we visualize our thinking, we can examine it and others can critique it. So I love this because it really taps into that design thinking side of me, and I'm going to introduce you really quickly just to this high level exercise. So this is something that you'll be doing just with pen and paper or a scratch pad, or you can just do it, you know, on another screen or something. You'll be doing this individually. But if a couple of you could give us some feedback in the chat as we go through, it'd just be good to get a little bit of interactivity. So I'm going to lead you through this little exercise. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is just jot down on a piece of paper, a little scratch pad. Even would be great if you had a sticky. If you're an Agilist, you probably have some stickies around. So on a sticky, just jot down something that you want in your life. Anything at all. It might be something like a new house. For some reason, a lot of people I know are moving in the middle of all this stay-at-home business. So you might want a new house, you might want a better job, you might decide you want more leisure time. Just jot down something that you want in your life. I'll give you just a few seconds for that. Now, when you're thinking about this thing that you want in your life, if you have another sticky, it'd be great if you could put it on another color sticky. Write down, if you got whatever you wrote down, how would you benefit? So if you had whatever you wrote down on one sticky, what would that do for you? And just jot that benefit down on another piece of sticky or a scratch pad. I have come to the understanding that not everybody has a house full of stickies, which it's hard to accept, but I understand that that's the reality. So here's an example. You might have gone with the buy a house, right? My idea is I would like to have a house. I want something in my life. I want a new house. And the ways that I would benefit, I would feel more grounded in my community. Maybe you are like fanatics and you said, you know what? I want to build the world's biggest digital fundraiser. And the benefit is I can feed people who lost access to food. So it doesn't matter whether it's personal or business or nonprofit, just an idea and a solution. So let me just pause there. Would anybody like to be brave and put in the chat what their idea and their benefit is? We'll see if anybody will give us any ideas. A home gym, nice. Okay, what would you benefit from getting that home gym? Somebody says a vaccine so I can get out of the home, nice. That person who put a home gym in, what would you benefit from getting a home gym? Exercise, convenience, health, weight loss, right? Great. Anybody else? All right, we'll see if some more come in. So the idea is that we've written down our idea, we've written down our benefit, much like TW. Sometimes we go further, and there's lots of benefits. This is pretty common. We're getting pretty good at thinking about those outcomes, right? All this, Simon Sinek, go back to the why and all these outcomes. Buy a house, I'm going to feel more grounded in my community. I could realize my tax benefits. Maybe I would have access to a better school. Maybe with that fundraiser, one of the benefits is that they could feed the hungry. Somebody else might say, you know what, it's going to bring a lot of joy to fans during COVID-19 when all these, sports events and these, movies, all these things were canceled. So it's going to bring joy to a lot of people. And then for some people, maybe the motivation is it's going to connect those fans with these athletes and celebrities, in a very unique way and build out these experiences. So it kind of feels like a win-win-win. Did anybody do that? Kind of like myself with buying a house or TW, like lots of benefits. So what might be a little bit of a detriment to just building out ideas and outcomes? Anybody have any idea? You can type it into the chat. What would be something that's maybe not ideal? No takers? So one of the things that happens when we start thinking about all these benefits, we start to talk ourselves into this idea, right? We start justifying this emotional thing that we've just had this idea. We start to fall in love with it, essentially. In design thinking, we fall in love with our baby. Our baby's beautiful, right? Nobody wants to say, hey, your baby's ugly. Somebody wrote, not ideal, solve too many problems, cognitive biases. That's exactly right. We are built in with some confirmation biases, and we have to just be aware of it. And what this little exercise that I'm about to do, it's going to teach us how to break that confirmation bias. So we jumped right to a solution. We sort of fallen in love with our idea. We jumped right to our solution.
And Julie, Cheryl says, I did an online auction in April that benefited 10 animal rescue organizations and people needed a distraction.
Nice. That's a good one. Impact mapping, another great way to flesh out cognitive biases. I love that. Thanks for that. It's a great ad. All right, I'm going to give you a little twist. This is going to be the hardest thing that you've done all day. So hopefully if you had two stickies, two different colors, you had this thing that you wanted and this benefit that you were going to get, just put them next to each other. Or if you wrote them out, they probably look a lot like I've written them there. I buy a house, I feel grounded in the community. Just going to do this really simple little thing. You're going to take that benefit, I'm going to just put it on top. Now, give you guys a minute to write that down. We're just going to take this a little bit further. Thinking of this benefit, thinking of how I could feel grounded in the community, this most desirable thing, right? This thing that I could get. I just want to ask you, how else could you get the same benefit? That's it. How else could you get the same benefit besides buying a house? And just jot those down. Very, very simple exercise to do with our stakeholders, with our product people when we're being told what to do, right? We're being told what the outcome is. We're giving all these reasons. We might ask, how else could we get the same benefit? Because sometimes what happens is final question is pretty powerful because it starts to disrupt that cognitive bias. It starts getting us out of that fixation on a single solution, and it starts to help us think expansively, other ways that we can get the same benefit. And sometimes they're a lot simpler. It leads us to these little experiments that we can have. Maybe I could be a community volunteer, even a school volunteer. I could start or join a nonprofit, Cheryl Anderson, just like that, right? These are ways that I could get grounded in my community. Maybe I could just hold a porch party. I could just, have some social distancing, put some music on and, do something to just engage in my community. And any one of these things could be small experiments to test out that assumption to see if I could feel more grounded in community before I went and spent the money and the effort to buy a house in that community. So let's just check in on the chat. Did anybody go a little further and come up with some extra ideas? TW, how else? Gym membership, YouTube videos, body weight exercises, horizontal running. Nice. It's interesting that mirror product, right? That if you guys have seen that new product where you do your exercises in front of this mirror and it kind of checks to see if you're in alignment and if you're following along. So it's really interesting when you start thinking about different ways to get the same benefit, how you can expand your thinking. So hopefully you had a couple of little aha moments with that. Very, very simple, just to take that conversation a little bit further. And one of the things that this does is it helps us to frame the conversation. And as you talk to people, as you visualize this and share this with others, some things start to expand and you might think of other opportunities, other problems you want to solve. And then you can start organizing your thoughts, or maybe you just have a disparate backlog that you want to put some order around. So perhaps, you know, something could slide over and be mapped to a different outcome. So maybe that school volunteer, as somebody's talking about it, you're really talking about that opportunity to impact the local education system, right? So you're starting to build out different opportunities mapped to different ideas. And it's just also a little bit of an ideation exercise to just go a little further. So this is a great opportunity to do this when you are, you know, framing a problem. It helps you to reframe and get input and to yes and all these great synergies that we typically see in ideation. And you can certainly do this with an existing backlog to bring a little bit of order to it and to increase, you know, that value proposition. Think about going up that vein pyramid and tying into some higher level values. As you start to flesh this out, you know, you're going to come up with more and more ideas and even higher values, right? So it might then start to feel like a little bit of a mapping of a tree, like a pyramid of your own. And if you're really thinking about applying those value pyramids, how you can go up that tree, right? Building out those high level objectives. So I want to pause here because if any of you are working in a space of objectives and key results, hopefully you can see where this might be a great exercise to do. You could go down and lay out some metrics at each one of these levels. You could go even further, you know, build out some experiments. I really encourage you to go out to Teresa Torres' site. I have found this to be a really powerful exercise and actually a lot of fun to do. One little tip that she gives: don't be falling in love with those ideas that don't have a problem to solve. So it might be crazy, but sometimes we have things in our backlog that just seem like good ideas, but they don't actually map to any organizational objective. So let's look at this silly little example. I want to prevent scurvy on my trip to cross the Atlantic. I'm going to bring some oranges and some grapefruits, and somebody says, I have a great idea. I love apples, but it doesn't actually meet the objective. So this is a chance to get rid of those pet projects and those side projects and those hippo projects. If you guys know what a hippo is, that highest paid person's opinion, and really build out, you know, some kind of a strategy that's really aligning to your objectives at the very top of your organization, all the way down, tying it all the way down to delivery management. And that's what we can do with the product mindset, is tie our business objectives all the way down to our delivery objectives. And you can go further. This is an example from Teresa's site. You can build out those experiments. So ID the problem. You could frame that as an opportunity. Define the value using those Bain pyramids. Go further, validate the assumptions. Build out the hypothesis about what kind of behavior has to change in order for your product to be a success. And on the chat, what is typical again, the highest paid person's opinion.
And Julie, quick time check. We got about five minutes till 7.
Awesome, great. So we're going to wrap up. I don't know if you guys saw on my slides, there was a little image on the left, the bicycle. Hopefully it made you curious, because we're about to go into a little challenge for you. Just to wrap up on this, on growing your product mindset, the things I hope you were able to take away tonight. Products must solve a problem for the customer. Build for your customers. Value is what they are willing to pay for, or a behavior that they're willing to change if you're building out services. we build products, if we build products without evidence of that value, it just could be waste. We're trying to break that confirmation bias and trying to stop moving into solutioning so soon. And then the paradigm is not to spend too much time in discovery, so we're solutioning too much upfront. And then from design thinking and Teresa Torres, when we visualize our thinking, others can critique it. So here's your all-in challenge. How can you apply your product mindset to think bigger and change the world? I hope that this has inspired you to think about those things that you want. Think about that Bain pyramid. Think about how you can get up to that self-actualization, and use this time to reach out to our neighbors, help solve the world around you, just even one person at a time. Be kind, be willing to reach out that helping hand. And I hope that you guys stay in touch, and that this was informative and impactful. And I believe that if we can change our thinking, we can change our world. I'd love to hear from you, your last little input from Menti. What is one thing that you took away from this session? I'll drop you a couple of sources in my contact information. And as you guys are entering anything that you took away from the session, if you've got any questions, let me know, and we'll move into wrapping up.
That's great, and thanks so much, Julie. That was a great presentation. Let's see if anyone. Let's see, just forgot about it. Okay, yes, we do have a recording. Someone was asking about the recording, so we do have a recording that we'll post. And Cece says reverse thinking, and Suresh says share.
Nice, thank you. And we have exploring what else might be possible before spending time and money. Love that, thank you. Check out that opportunity solution tree. Just try it yourself. It's literally one of the easiest discovery exercises in the world. Thank you for that. Just a couple of sources for you. I really love how Carol Dweck's work around mindset really ties into the product mindset. I have found that interesting. My new obsessive book is Decisive. I sometimes just sort of kind of get sick of Agile books and Scrum books, and Decisive is really about human behavior and the process of making decisions. So I have found that to be one of my top favorites in the last couple of months. Dual Transformation really goes into some of those business stories that we've heard so much about. And of course, the great Marty Kagan, who gives us so much guidance with Inspired and some of the other stuff that comes out of Silicon Valley. And that's it. Stay in touch. Yeah, I'll post on LinkedIn. You can text me if you want to give me your email. I'll put you on my list. But if you want to just connect with me at LinkedIn, I can make sure I post those slides. And hopefully this is an opening to a dialogue. You try some of these things. Let me know how they work for you. Let me know if you want to get on a chat. We can, discover some things together. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Julie, and everyone else. Thanks for joining. Next month, we may change the date. Just stay tuned. We're working with the speaker, but due to the 4th of July weekend close to our date, there's a possibility we may push that out a week. So just pay attention to what we post out on the meetup group, because it may change by a week or so. But we appreciate you joining tonight, and we'll get the recording posted pretty soon for you. Thanks so much, Julie.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.